Alright guys, so we're moving right along. So by now we should know what makes up bones, their different layers, and how bones are made. So let's start naming a few. So there are 206 bones in the body, and that sounds like a lot, but they're grouped up in ways that make remembering them a little bit easier. We'll start with the axial skeleton, and then we'll work our way out to the extremities. So starting at the top, we have the skull. So you would think that would be all one bone, but it's actually made up of a whole bunch of different bones. You've got your frontal, parietal, occipital, temporal, and sphenoid bones, making up most of the skull. And that's from the front kind of all the way around. There are more inside, especially around the nose. The bones of the skull would be considered flat bones and are joined together by sutures. So when you were a baby, the spaces between all these bones, they were actually cartilage, and they were called the fontanelles. By the time you were 2, all of these fontanelles had closed up and become solid bone. Attached to the lower part of your skull, you have the mandible, which we call your lower jaw. Coming off the skull, we have our spinal column, and it's a series of irregular shaped bones called vertebrae, which house and protect the nerves coming from our brain. The spine can be broken up into 5 parts: the cervical spine, thoracic spine, lumbar spine, sacrum, and coccyx. Each section has a different number of vertebrae. A way I've always used to remember it is that the sections line up with your meals for the day. So you eat breakfast at 7, eat lunch at 12, supper at 5, and then snack at 11. So coccyx and sacrum. These numbers line up with the different bones that are in your spine. The ribs all come off your spinal cord, and they start at your thoracic spine. The first 7 ribs are what's called true ribs, and that means that they connect to the breastbone or the sternum directly. The next 3 sets are false ribs because they attach to cartilage that comes off the breastbone, but not actually to the breastbone directly. The last 2 sets are called floating ribs because they don't attach to the sternum at all. True, false, or floating ribs are flat bones filled with red marrow, and their purpose is to protect the lungs and the heart from damage. So moving on to the appendicular skeleton, let's start at the top and work down. Remember that there's a left and a right for each of these bones. We've mentioned the shoulder blades or scapula a few times. It's a big flat bone with a large surface area that allows the big muscles in your shoulder lots of room to attach. The clavicle runs to the front of the shoulder and is one of the most commonly fractured bones. Your humerus bone is the bone in your upper arm, and that fits into a nice pocket created by your scapula and your clavicle. Distally from that, we have 2 bones in the arm called the radius and the ulna. The radius is the larger of the 2, and it sits on the outside of the arm when in the anatomical position. There are actually a lot of bones in your hand. In your wrist, we have 8 round carpal bones, and in the hand itself, we have 5 metacarpals. The bones in the fingers are called phalanges, and we have 14 of them in each hand. Alright, moving down, we get to your hips, and this is called your pelvis. So your pelvis is actually 2 coxal bones that have been fused together, and each coxal itself has 3 bones: the ilium, the ischium, and the pubic bone, and they're all fused together by cartilage. The big bones in your upper leg are called your femur, and your lower leg has 2 bones: the tibia, and behind it the smaller fibula. An easy way to remember this one is when you think of fibula, think fib, which is a little lie. Your kneecap is called patella, and that's that round irregular shaped bone, and it's wrapped in tendons. Your ankle and foot are made up of a series of bones, just like your hands, only instead of carpals and metacarpals, we have 7 tarsals and 5 metatarsals. The largest tarsal would be called the heel bone, and it's also called your calcaneus. Lastly, 14 phalanges in the toes as well. So there you go, all 206. Refer to this list. You can also find it in the introduction of this section for the bones that I expect you guys to memorize for quizzes.